And we're joined on the line right now, actually, by another very special guest, Tom Barrett. He is running for Congress against Alyssa Slotkin, Democrat Congresswoman in the great state of Michigan. Tom, thanks for joining us again on Breitbart News Saturday.
Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, okay, so there's a bombshell story that just came out yesterday afternoon, and I was shocked when I read this. This is a story from Fox News. The headline says, Democrat Alyssa Slotkin moved into the home of a lobbyist campaign donor to run in new district. Slotkin represents Michigan's 8th congressional district, but will now be running in a tight race in the 7th. And then the story says that she moved into the home, the Lansing, Michigan condo of a lobbyist who is also one of her campaign donors in order to run in this new district. And it really unbelievable. Her campaign is saying there's nothing wrong with this. What do you say?
Yeah, it is unbelievable. You almost could not make it up if you were trying. The fact that my opponent has decided to move into the home of a Washington, D.C. lobbyist who has millions of dollars of government contracts that are directly interfacing with committees that Congresswoman Slotkin serves on is just, I mean, it's extremely problematic and it's troubling. It's got ethical concerns. I'll tell you, I didn't move anywhere to run in this district. I've lived here since 4 days after I returned home from Iraq. My wife and I got married. We're raising a family here. We have 4 little kids that we're raising. We are in this community. And Alyssa Slotkin, desperate to preserve Nancy Pelosi's speakership and majority in the United States Congress that's decimating our economy and just crushing families with the rising cost of living, runaway crime, and all the other challenges that our country is facing, decides to hopscotch around. And instead of, purchasing or renting an apartment, a new home, whatever she wanted to do to give herself the thin veil of cover of being somehow from this district, she decides to take a shortcut and moves into the home of a lobbyist from Washington, D.C. And I'll tell you what's other interesting about this. Her lease only goes until November, so we're excited to make this decision very easy for Alyssa Slotkin. When she loses this election in 59 more days, she can pack her bags and go right back home to Washington, D.C., where she's actually from, and I'll represent this district, my community, my constituents, and put their issues front and center in Washington, D.C., and put our country back on the right track.
Well, and maybe she can get a lobbying contract at NioWave Incorporated, right? That's like, look, okay, so people understand this. According to Michigan voter registration data, I'm reading right from the Fox News story. Slotkin updated her voting address in May of this year to reflect the address of a home in Lansing currently owned by Jerry Hollister, an executive at NioWave Incorporated, a Lansing-based pharmaceutical manufacturing company that has received millions in federal funding. Now, Slotkin campaign denied that her congressional office advocated for or was involved in any way with NioWave contracts and says she pays fair market rent for her Lansing home. Hollister, however, works as the chief operating officer and director of government relations at the company, where his responsibilities are, quote, to continue developing congressional relationships, local community relationships, and media relationships important to continued growth, end quote, according to his LinkedIn profile. He listed an additional role as a principal consultant at BBC Entrepreneurial Training and Consulting LLC, another Michigan-based technology company that assists organizations with grant proposals for government funding. You're telling me that she had nothing to do with helping this guy get any government funding?
Right.
Come on, I got a bridge to sell you.
Exactly. Right? It is actually worse than when Joe Biden tried to tell us that inflation was at 0%. It's like the emperor has no clothes. First, Joe Biden tries to tell us that inflation is 0%, and then Alyssa Slotkin tries to tell us that it's just, nothing you need to worry about, nothing you need to see, that she's renting from a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. I wouldn't even know where to go to rent a place from a lobbyist in Washington, D.C., somewhere here in mid-Michigan, hundreds of miles away from the United States Capitol. And somehow by amazing coincidence, the landlord that she has at this apartment she's renting, or it might even be a room in his house that she's renting, is somehow totally above board and nothing that we need to be concerned about at all. The ethical questions that it raises are substantial. Alyssa Slotkin has Definitely been a proponent of rewarding favorable corporations with direct government spending to prop them up. And this is another example of that conflict of interest between big government and big corporations when the American people and the taxpayers and residents of my district lose out and our cost of living continues to rise because of failed policies and failed decisions that they make in another desperate attempt to preserve their majority in Congress and not allow us to have the voice of the people to retake a conservative majority in the United States Congress. It's why I'm running. Folks who are interested in learning more about me can go to my website, TomBarrettForCongress.com. We'd love to have their engagement in this. My race, just last week, USA Today did a profile on the 12 races they say are going to decide control of Congress this year. And my district here in the 7th Congressional District in Michigan was ranked 4th in the entire country. They know that they're under threat. They are spending millions of dollars from outside of Michigan to try and steal this seat back from the people of Michigan and allow Nancy Pelosi to have another term as Speaker of the House. This is their Alamo. They know if they lose here that they lose their majority. So we're in the fight. We're going to win. We have 59 days to go, and we're going to win this for the American people.
Right. And now, so the reason why this is so important is it's not just a laboratory discussion or, questions about, this contract and that contract. Alyssa Slotkin, as a Democrat congresswoman, she ran in her first race and then in her second race as she claimed that she was going to be a moderate, right? She claimed that she was going to be a reasonable person when she got there. There is not one piece of legislation, not one, Tom. I can't think of one, and I do this for a living. I follow all these votes in Congress. I track every one of them. Not one where she broke with Biden and Pelosi. She voted for every single one of these things. So when you're talking about trillions of dollars in new spending that has been going out the door from Washington, D.C. over the course of this administration, trillions of dollars in new spending that has led to the inflation crisis. And where's that money going? Into the pockets of her lobbyist landlord, right? Like, among others. But the point is that that's what's causing the inflation. That's what's causing the gas prices problems. That's what's causing a lot of other problems that we're having out there. She voted for every single one of them.
She did. She has a 100% voting record with Joe Biden. She told people of mid-Michigan when she was elected that she was going to be a moderate, independent, nonpartisan, and she has broken that promise every single vote. She has voted with Joe Biden 100% of the time. There is no difference and no distinction between her and the Biden agenda that she owns with each of the votes that she has cast in support, getting us to the point that we're at now, this misery that families are facing with the cost of living at a 40-year high, with gas prices still unaffordable for working families, and people that just can't get by under the Biden economy. On top of that, we have a record amount of illegal border crossings. We have crime on the rise. Lansing, Michigan is the central geographic city where Alyssa Slotkin pretends to live now. In Lansing, Michigan is now the 9th most dangerous city in the United States, and they had a record number of murders last year alone. All of these are attributable to the failed leadership coming out of the White House that have been directly enabled by Alyssa Slotkin 100% of the time.
And instead of she's spending all this time voting for all these Democrat big spending proposals and voting for this radical agenda that's coming out of the Democrats in Congress, yet she's not spending any time doing something that I would argue is, and we've talked about this with basically every guest over the course of today's show, and I do it every weekend because nobody else is talking about it. These drug overdoses, right? Like, so, I mean, I know this is tearing apart every community in this country. So Alyssa Slotkin has done nothing. I can state this very clearly. Has done nothing to help people who are afflicted by the opioid crisis, the fentanyl crisis, the drug overdoses crisis.
You're exactly right.
What would you do? What would you do if you're elected, Tom Barrett, to the U.S. Congress? How would you do that to do this differently?
You're exactly right. My district is 1,500 miles from the border, but we are a border state and a border community just like every other town in America. We had a record number of fentanyl-induced overdose deaths since Biden took office. Our border is wide open, fentanyl being manufactured in China and coming directly across our border where we've had a record number of illegal border crossings. We must secure the border. There is no more option to this. We have to stop the bleeding. We have to secure the border. We had the leading cause of death of Americans age 18 to 45. The leading cause of death of Americans my age is now fentanyl and opioid-related overdose deaths. That is unacceptable. It has been enabled by the complete just failure of leadership by the Biden administration, the unsecuring. This is the first administration in history that has moved backward in unsecuring our border, in a conscious decision to do that. And Alyssa Slotkin likes to talk a big game, but when the vote's on the line, she votes with Joe Biden. And that is so misleading to the people of this district. She talks like Joe Manchin and votes like Nancy Pelosi.
Right. Now, another example of something is we saw President Biden give this speech in Pennsylvania a little over a week ago. And in this speech, he attacks half the country as threats to democracy. Alyssa Slotkin, all Trump voters is what he said, right? They're all threats to democracy. Now, look, I don't know if you voted for Trump or you voted for Biden or whoever anybody out there voted for. You're not a threat to. There are good, decent, honest people that are working hard. And frankly, the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden attacking people like that is like Hillary Clinton calling people the basket of deplorables. Alyssa Slotkin, supposed moderate, apparently went missing in action over the last 10 days. I haven't seen a word from her about it. She is not defending people out there from the president of her own party that is attacking them. What do you think about, I mean, again, just like the missing in action thing, it's just nonstop with these people.
Yep. It is. And they are trying to just squeeze out anything they can. They're pouring millions of dollars in outside money from Washington, D.C., from New York, from California, from these elite coastal communities where the woke progressives fund this Democratic operation, pouring millions of dollars of ads, attacking me in my district. All I want is safe communities. Every single person in America, regardless of your socioeconomic status, your race, ethnicity, your circumstance, you deserve to live in a safe community where you can send your kids to school safely, where you can walk down the street and not be threatened about your individual safety and livelihood. We want safe communities. We want better schools for our kids. We want economic prosperity. We don't want runaway inflation that is now high enough to rob every single working American of an entire month's pay over the course of the year with how high inflation is. That is directly because of Joe Biden's leadership and directly because of the reckless spending that Alyssa Slotkin has voted with him 100% of the time. So we just want very simple things. We want the government to stay out of our way. We want to be able to raise our children. We want to be able to live our lives and enjoy our livelihoods and enjoy the fruits of our labor without the government intruding on us and telling us how to live our lives every second and every moment of every single day. And these Democrats continue to stand against us. They shut down energy pipelines. They crater our economy with runaway inflation. They allow our border to become unsecured, and they allow crime to take root. And now we have crime on the rise, everything from identity theft to murder going up in every single demographic, and it's spilling over outside of the cities and in neighboring communities. This is a problem that rests at the feet of those that have allowed it to take place through their failures, Alyssa Slotkin and Joe Biden.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tom Barrett, Republican nominee for Congress there in Michigan's 7th Congressional District. Really want to thank you for joining us here on Breitbart News Saturday. Again, where can people go to learn more about you and get involved in the campaign if they so choose?
Thank you again. They can go to my website, tombarrettforcongress.com. Help us fight back against these millions in outside funding by these coastal elitists and Nancy Pelosi and her allies in Congress desperately trying to save her time as Speaker of the House. We need a new majority in Congress. That's why I'm running. I would deeply appreciate their support.
All right, Tom Barrett, sir, really want to thank you for joining us. We'll have you back again real soon. A very, very important congressional race up there in Michigan. We'll be tracking it very closely.